Hi, obviously I'm not an artist and welcome to my end of year review. Before I start, just to look behind the curtain, when I release a painting vlog, it's not always the most recent models I've completed, but rather the models I want to display and discuss at the time. A little bit more history before I start the review proper. Last year, 2022, I painted exactly 100 models and stated that this year I would paint less but to a higher standard, especially on the Blood Angels, which I feel I achieved, mainly because I feel I've finally honed in on what my style is. Okay, let's start this review. Starting with model number 1 of 2023, which surprisingly is an orc, to be exact, a Hero Quest orc. It was painted for a mission in that game, as it is a mini-boss of sorts. First time ever to paint an orc, and only the 5th official mini from that game system. As for the other 4 minis, check out my most popular video to date, number 5, that one being the one on Hero Quest The Heroes. Very basic paint job here. There was a temptation to use contrast paints, but that would require buying more paints, and I have acrylic paints for orc flesh, fabrics and metallics, and can use a traditional base wash layer highlight dry brush. Minis 2, 3 and 4 are Dreadnoughts of the Venerable, which has gone to Legends, Ironclad, which has gone to Legends, and Furioso variety. These I've previously done a video on, video painting vlog number 4 if you want to see more detail. In terms of additional Dreadnoughts that I need to complete in my collection, there is a Brutalis, which I'm looking to add to the 4th company, and a Redemptor, which I might do in a Flesh Tearer scheme, since I've already have one in my 4th company. In terms of Dreadnoughts I want to purchase, there is Leviathan from Warhammer 30k The Horus Heresy, as both ranged and melee variants. However, the Ballistus, Dirideo and the Contemptor, I've never liked the aesthetics and aren't looking to add them to the army anytime soon. Mini number 5 is the first Necron completed in 2023, that being a Triarch Stalker. A Triarch Stalker is a Necron battle walker, most commonly employed as a dedicated tank hunter vehicle, employing strategies such as outflanking enemy vehicles, then opening fire from the rear with either heat, ray or particle shredder weapons. In close combat, it is armed with slicing forearms, and defensively it has quantum shielding. Furthermore, it has the ability to send targeting data to nearby Necron units, thus improving their chances of successfully hitting during shooting. Easy enough paint scheme, but I did have an issue building the cockpit, and there are some noticeable gaps between parts. This was due to painting in sub-assemblies and then building. One more noticeable aspect of the Mini is its large footprint. As it is not on a base and has adjustable legs, it takes up quite some space. As you can see, it maxes out the turntable. Number 6 is the same as vlog number 6, the Vindicator Siege Tank. I had considered adding 2 more of these to make a Linebreaker Squadron. A Linebreaker Squadron engages the enemy at the strongest part using the Demolisher cannons to destroy enemy trenches, buildings and fortification, especially in urban areas. A single Linebreaker Squadron can demolish entire city blocks with relative ease. A frequent opponent of mine who plays Death Guard has known to run a similar formation with 3 Plague Burst Crawlers. These demon engines can definitely be regarded as siege tanks, but also artillery pieces too. They roll up Main Street with its big guns, or shell from a distance with water-like weapons. Minis 7 and 8 are as numerous as Tactical Rocks are in Space Marine armies, Lieutenants. These are the one from the Indomitus box. He is commonly known as the Blade Guard Lieutenant due to his weapon selection of Power Sword, Storm Shield and Volkite Pistol. And the one from the Agastus Strike Force box, which I built with a Bolt Rifle and Power Sword, as they both act as Vanguard and Sturgon types respectively. They have recently replaced my Lieutenants from the 8th edition box, mostly because they are painted and equipped better. I'm not going to spend any more time discussing these two, as I have designs on doing a separate video on my Lieutenants when I've painted them all. Let me just check, see how many I got to paint. Oh, only 2. Honestly thought there'd be more. This next squad makes up Minis 9 to 13 and again was subject to a video I recently completed, the Assault Intercessors. If you've not seen that video, and I recommend you do, you will notice at the end I display more of these I have to paint in a semi-humorous fashion. They are actually modified with unique pauldrons from other Blood Angels kits, as they were originally going to be Veteran Assault Intercessors. However, they have since been redacted from the Space Marine Codex. I may do them anyway, or return the pauldrons to standard and paint them as a successor chapter to the Blood Angels. Mini 14 is Captain Carlion, the Terminator captain of the 1st company. He was showcased in the Assault Terminator vlog. Again, a good video if you haven't seen it, and if you have, watch it again if you like, as it's only 5 minutes and 3 seconds. I think an errata though is needed, as I incorrectly pronounced his name. It's actually Aranus, not Arius, as I stated at the time. I recently, within the last month, painted another Terminator model and named character. They'll be displayed towards the end of the video. A Necron Squad of 3 makes up minis 15, 16 and 17, the fast attacker Necron version of a jetbike / outrider squad, the Tomb Blades. Tomb Blades were originally space fighters, as the Necron's robotic bodies meant that pressure sealed and canopy craft were necessary. So successful did the craft perform in space battles that modified versions soon appeared planetside. The Tomb Blades are capable of aerial maneuvers controlled by complex equations that organic pilots could not perform without succumbing to blackouts and nausea. The Tomb Blade has an unusual motion for a craft of its design. Rather than the arrow-shaped contours of other jet bikes, it has a dimensional repulsor engine that ensures gravity and friction has little effect on its frame. Due to this, the crafts often corkscrew across the battlefield rather than taking a more direct approach, constantly changing vectors and altitudes to interfere with enemy aim. No pilot of flesh and blood could ever hope to withstand this style of flight. This reflected in the game is often a shooting penalty against them. Tomb Blades often operate far ahead of the main army, striking at lightly defended positions with one of the 3 main weapon choices for this unit. But honestly, I think they look like a flying robot prawn. Don't Necron flies all look tasty? I gotta start making videos when I'm hungry. This is the second squad of Tomb Blades I've completed, and thankfully I learned from the frustrations I created in the original squad. Firstly, paint them completed, not in sub-assemblies. And secondly, do not magnetize them, as magnets this small, with fingers on the larger side, does not make for harmony, as while I temporarily gained Magneto's powers, it was an unpleasant experience having to remove tiny magnets superglued to my fingertips. An elite assassin style Necron makes up Mini 18, the Hexmark Destroyer, which is a 6-armed Necron Deathmark, the Deathmark Necron being their dedicated sniper unit, who is part of the Destroyer cult and want nothing more than to kill everything around them. The Destroyer cult is a subsect of Necron society. Those of the Destroyer cult are Necrons who have descended into apparent madness and are considered untrustworthy and dangerous by their own kind. In battle, they teleport in and use their corrupted computer data to aid them in targeting and dispatching nearby enemies in a halo of fire from their many pistols. This is the second of 2 hex marks in the Necron army, the first being an earlier model painted using greens rather than the now standard orange for disintegrator weapons. These are fun models on the tabletop too, taking advantage of being a lone operator. They cannot be targeted outside of 12 inches, but can shoot from 18 inches. Back to the Blood Angels for 19, 20 and 21, and some overdue heavy firepower. The Eradicator squad consists of 3 Space Marines wearing Gravis armor, which is thicker than standard and armed with melter weaponry. These are the monopose minis that came in the Indomitus box set rather than the fancier kit with many different options including access to a multi-melter. I also enjoy painting Gravis armor, as layered plates are a good way of practicing brush control due to the many edge highlights you can choose to do. Also, as discussed in my Assault Intercessor video, one of the perks of painting Blood Angels infantry is that different colour helmets are welcome, as they break up all of the red. Looking forward to painting aggressors and heavy intercessors that live in my back catalogue of Space Marines left to paint. Okay, this brings me to the summer. It's at this point, due to the nature of my profession, I have a lot more painting time available and embark on a big project such as terrain sets, a super heavy or an oversized squad. This year I opted for a new army painted with a different technique, introducing the Order of the Amaranthian Shield, a 1000-ish point Adeptus Sororitas force consisting of 2 combat patrols and additional models from the Hachette Partswork Imperial magazine. All in, this is 43 minis completed over a month and a half using a painting technique known as slap chop. These are as follows: 3 Paragon Warsuits, 1 Rhino, 6 Ardro Flagellant, 8 Sisters Repentia, 2 Penitent Engines, 1 Canoness, 1 Kitbash Palatine, 1 Repentia Superior, and 19 Sisters of Battle. Slap chop is the in vogue term for performing different stages of highlighting using dry brushing techniques before the layering stage, which is done with a speed paint or contrast acrylic. The scheme of the army is purple, black and gold. The Sisters Army infantry was frustrating to build and paint due to being considerably small and fragile, certainly compared to Space Marines, but even compared to the spindliest Necron warrior. The mech suits, which consist of the Paragon war suits and Penitent engines, were probably the closest to a familiar size, as they're around Dreadnought scale. They gave me an opportunity to practice fire and flame on the braziers or the engines, and not that I don't have plenty of chance on the Space Marines, but edge highlights on vehicles with the war suits. You may notice that one of the models have different colour edges to the others, and that was a pure accident when selecting paints. The HQ consists of the Canoness, Palatine and Repentia Superior. The Palatine is actually made from Superior, which is probably obvious based on the pose. Sisters HQ are ridiculously priced based on their size alone, so when faced with a second Superior, it made sense to kit bash. The Power Sword arm is taken from a Seraphim. I do have several Seraphim to paint, but they somehow fell out of the army when I was batch painting and can be bothered to add them back in. The Arco-Flagellants and Sister Repentia were the least enjoyable to paint, and I think their look dictates that. I can see my lack of effort here. I think it's the paints I chose too though. Lead Belcher, which I disliked so much I attempted to turn it into a comedic bit in my earliest videos. Guilliman Flesh, which is always hit and miss when I'm doing skin. And Black Templar, which is a bit too thin and seems to flow where I don't want it to. The Battle Sisters took the most advantage of the slapjock technique, but due to my inconsistent ability to dry brush white ink onto the black prime, the highlights are bigger and smaller based on how much ink was on the brush when I batch painted them. I recently learned that dry brushing does require the brush to be slightly wet, and with this knowledge I'm hoping that if I use slapchop again, hopefully it should have more consistent results. There are some specialist sisters such as the one with a complicated banner and some special weapons that have a smouldering corpse on the base. This was new and I followed a painting guide as I was unfamiliar on how to do this. Another new experience was using Citadel's Martian Iron Earth technical paint, which is a texture paint that when it's dry cracks its own surface, giving it a dried out red alien earth effect. It's really effective against the purple models as orange is complementary on the colour wheel. The only downside is making sure the base is fully black before applying it, as a white or grey primer overspray on a base does not achieve the same effect than pure black. This only leaves the Rhino to discuss, and quite frankly is not much of a discussion, as at this point I've painted, six Mark II Rhinos to date. The Sisters Rhino is far more ornamental and therefore more interesting to paint. Of being as a vehicle, the contrast paint, which I haven't mentioned up until now, is called Slidish Purple, does not cover flat panels well. However, without some purple it would just look out of place, therefore I primed some setback panels with Corax White and then covered them using blue tack and sprayed the whole tank Chaos Black. Once dried, I removed the tack and painted over the white prime with several coats of purple. As you can see, the contrast behaved like a wash and left streaks. The reliquary was finished with golds, steels and whites. I'm happy with it, but happy when the summer project came to an end too. As the force only clocks in at 1,000 points, more units are going to be needed. Now the Sisters of Battle don't have the most in-depth selections, but I like variety, so upon reflection I have considered adding the following: a Retributor squad, a Novitiate squad, Sacrosancts, Castigator tank, Exorcist tank, an Inquisitor, and an allied Imperial Knight. Let's see what the Amaranthine shield looks like in a year. For a large batch, a palette cleanse was needed, and as I stated in my Terminator video, I was up in Nottingham during the summer at Warhammer World. Amongst enjoying the dioramas and the good food, honestly it's one of the best meals we had that week, I did make some interesting purchases, including the next two. The Catan Shard of the Nightbringer, number 64, and the Catan Shard of the Deceiver, 65. I've done a video on Catan Shards, give it a watch, it certainly needs the views. Anyway, both of these minis are fine cast resin, which I have designs on working with further next year with some Blood Angel characters. Can you guess which ones? Earlier in the year, I was in the mood to purchase a big model for the Blood Angels. I flirted with some Forge World vehicles, but ultimately decided on a Horus Heresy tank. When I found myself in Warhammer in Cardiff, I needed to decide which one. The Scarian, the Spartan, no, the biggest and most expensive one of course. Number 66 is the Kratos Assault tank. By far the biggest tank I have. It came on 6 sprues with loads and loads of weapon options. I love this tank for many reasons, mostly its absurdity. It took 3/4 of a can of Mepiston Red just to prime it. not to mention all the time-consuming curves and edges to practice highlighting on. In-game, it's in Warhammer Legends, and therefore can't be fielded in competitive play. What a stupid purchase. For extra reliquary, I added some Blood Angel icons from the Stormraven kit and some Blood Angels Legion decals. It's currently set up with las cannons and the Kratos battle cannon, and I did have designs on mounting a gunner with a heavy bolter on the turret, but due to the time I had already spent on the tank, I wanted to move on, and completing the gunner was an essential. The mini identified as 67 is the Primaris Apothecary. It has been my collection for a very long time. So long, in fact, it was in Hachette Partsworks' Warhammer Conquest magazine. This was the precursor to Warhammer Imperial magazine. The reason I have not completed this mini until now is due to two conditions. Firstly, the colour, white. This will be my second ever white mini I've painted, and the first one is a Sanguinary Priest. It's the #1 model I think about repainting whenever I view my Blood Angels collection. Secondly, for a single character model, it has far more pieces than most, and the pose it is in requires a surprising amount of sub-assemblies to paint without worrying about getting colours like red and especially black on a white base coat. Even though I have a recipe I like for white, which I stated originally in the Dreadnought video, which consists of Citadel's Celestia Grey layer, Apothecary white contrasts as a shade, and then highlights using white acrylic ink, there still is trepidation about painting a mostly white miniature. Anyway, I feel this came out relatively well and gives me confidence for painting additional white models in future. Back to the vehicles for 68, with a Predator Destructor battle tank. The Predator is amongst the oldest of tanks in the Space Marine motor pool, and Blood Angels have a unique version called a Bal Predator, unique in the fact that it's faster and has different turret and sponson weapons. I was gifted a Rhino, which quite frankly should be free with any purchase from Games Workshop/Warhammer shop, not £25 to £30 at the moment. Not owning a Predator Destructor, I do have a Predator Annihilator. I took the Rhino kit and brought a turret and sponsons from eBay. I had thought about getting a Bal Predator turret and sponsons, but figured with two already, I could do a video next year on different Predator tanks. There is not much new here. I think the Destructor is the best looking of all Predators, as the long barrel of the autocannon really does sell it as a proper looking battle tank. But I am confident that these tanks won't be playable in forthcoming editions of 40k, as they'll be replaced by the Gladiator type grav tanks that were introduced relatively recently. The final three miniatures were painted at the same time, and are characters that are positioned to be in command roles for the fourth company, starting with the Primaris Chaplain number 69. I do have several chaplains, which would lend itself to a video in the future, but this one is from the 9th edition Indomitus box with a head swap. The head swap is largely because I don't like the original, as it gives off strong Kano from Mortal Kombat vibes, which I feel does not fit with the Blood Angels. I like the pose, with the power stance and the aggressive waving of the Crucius Arcanum, which is a chaplain's battle mace. And chaplains are relatively simple to paint, with a black base, grey edges, gold trim, and plenty of purity seals. The next mini, number 70, is this year's second Terminator, the Blood Angels Librarian in Terminator armour. Interestingly, it's kind of, but not officially, a named character called Brother Calistarius. Those familiar with lore may recognise who they become, as after falling to the blood curse known as the Black Rage, they enter a battle and during it have a building collapse on top of them, where through pure strength of will overcome the Black Rage, and in doing so are reborn as Mephiston, Lord of Death, who is now the Blood Angels' chief librarian. Calistarius has other sculpts too, including being the librarian in the 3rd and 4th edition of Space Hulk. Librarians have blue armour regardless of which Space Marine chapter they belong to. This was something I was looking forward to because before I found my old 2nd, 3rd edition Blood Angels army, which was what ignited my love of painting minis, I actually bought the First Strike 8th edition starter box and painted the 3 Intercessors and 3 Reavers within with ultramarine colours. Painting blue armour is as follows: Macragge blue primer, Cantor blue base, Dragonov nightshade, and highlights of Macragge blue, Aldorf blue, and Calgar blue. Painting this one in combination with 2 Primaris sized minis definitely displays the difference in scale. To counter this, I mounted it on some cork, covered it in texture paint to simulate rubble and debris, but unlike the Assault Terminators, I mounted by pinning using a trim paperclip and glued it for a much more secure bond to the base. And lastly, number 71, which is the last miniature I'll be painting before the release of this video, and it's a Primaris Captain from the Indomitus box. Spectacular mini and a spectacular tactical rock, armed with a master-crafted sword and relic shield. This really was an odyssey of so many colours and shapes: red armour, gold relics, black cloth, and of course, grey rocks. Most Space Marine HQs, they can be intimidating due to the intricacies, but with confidence after completing several of these this year comes success. Success that you can set yourself. The Captain here also completes the 3 HQs of the 4th company. This concludes the end of the year review of all miniatures I painted this year. So what's next for 2024? I have designs on moving through the completion of the 4th company. As it stands, I have the following to paint: 1 10-man intercessor squad, 2 10-man tactical squads, 1 5-man heavy intercessor squad, 1 10-man desolation squad, 1 10-man assault intercessors with jump packs, 5 outriders, 2 invade ATVs, and a sanguinary priest with jump pack. And that's a lot of Space Marines, but painting a variety of projects is what keeps productivity up, which is why the chances of this getting done in 2024 is probably not going to happen. My summer project is going to be an Imperial Knight. Additional projects include expanding the Sisters army and completing some Necron vehicles and some characters. I would also like to do some more HeroQuest, and 2 of my favourite franchises, Resident Evil and Aliens, have mini war games, which I own, so who knows. Great, thanks for watching. Please like, comment and subscribe as I continue to chronicle the collecting, construction and creating. Hope you have a pleasant festive break and a happy new year.